to blood before the development of stains, and obviously once you use a stain you can hold a slide with blood on it for years and it doesn't deteriorate. With live blood you have only a window of opportunity for maybe up to half an hour to an hour before things start to change. So in our laboratory we can maybe do 14 live bloods in one day. A small routine pathology laboratory can process 500 smears stained in a day because it goes through a machine. So quite a lot of difference as far as how much money you're going to make out of it, which is one big factor. We use live blood particularly for looking at digestive system, immune system, information about the gut, and as we go through you'll start to see I presume we'll get a range of things coming up. We normally do. The other test I'm going to do is called a clot retraction test. It's a very old test. It was developed in 1942 in Massachusetts by an oncologist who was doing a bedside ESR, which is a very standard pathology test that looks at inflammatory. He noticed that all his cancer patients showed these very large inflammatory masses, and it started out as a cancer detection test. There were several papers published in America around that time. The Europeans picked up on it, and there was quite a lot of research in Europe between about 1950 and 1970, and it was being done in Russia, in Italy, in Poland, and it was done as a cancer detection test. Now, the trials they were doing in the 50s and the 70s, they were getting 95% specificity, and we're talking a finger prick test. And it's quite a remarkable test. It can give a lot of information. We now know that the masses that we're looking at are caused by oxidation. And one of the interesting things is when you look at the old research papers, particularly those coming out of Russia in the 50s, they show, say, 30 cancer patients' blood who all have these signature masses that indicate there's a cancerous process, which is interesting enough, but the bit that interested me was where they start showing their control patients. So they will show pictograms of the clot patterns from 30 healthy people, and they're perfect. Now, we average 3,500 of these tests a year, and we probably find 3 out of 3,500 that we would consider perfect. We could no longer do a trial this way on this test because we are so much more unhealthier than people living in Russia in the 50s. And that makes you think. So do you want to come up? So I'll just start, and as we go through I'll tell you what we're seeing. And I'll put both hands left and right. Wait for it to dry. That's it now. I've just got a drop of blood on each of Annie's little fingers, and we're just going to let it sit there. It's not exactly an invasive test. Most people cope. I have had men have to lie down to have it done. Okay, now we're going to start with the live. Can you hear me? I don't have to worry about where the microphone is. So we'll start with the live blood. We're waiting for the other one to dry. Okay, so these are red cells. I do need to move this. Okay. So you can see we have individual cells, and I'm going to move the microscope around And one of the things, okay, this is interesting. What you're seeing are cells fading out. Can you see how they're just disappearing? Now, what's happening is we're getting a build-up of pressure on the slide, and we've actually lost all those cells. Where do I find them? Okay, normal red cell, you get pressure building up on a slide with the blood on it and a cover slip on top. I mean, fluid between two pieces of glass, you're going to get a build-up of pressure. Red cells should be able to take that pressure. When we get this, what's happening now, it's called ghosting of the red cells, and it indicates that you're low in essential fatty acids because the red cell membrane is a lipid layer. And if you have a problem with the lipid layer, which you need to maintain by having adequate essential fatty acids in the diet, the cells break down too easily. So it could be that you're not getting enough essential fatty acids in the diet. It might be that you're not absorbing, and by the end we should have an idea of which. But you would find having low EFAs, you'll get some neurological symptoms, you'll find concentration's not so good, short-term memory's not so good, skin will get dry. All these are signs of low essential fatty acid. So I just need to do a scan and see what we've got. And it might be a little out of focus for you, which is really to do with my eyesight and nothing else. Okay, now what I'm doing is tracking across the drop to see how uniformly the red cells are spread. Now, red cells have a slight electric charge. They all have the same charge, and like charges repel. So what we should get is separation of the red cells. When we start to get this effect, now that's called rouleau, and it's just where the red cells are a bit sticky and they stack up together. What it tells us is that there is protein is not being digested as completely as it should be. You end up with a coating of protein molecules on the cell surface, and it makes them a bit sticky. Now, the main problem there is that no matter how good your diet is, if you don't digest properly, you don't get the full benefit. And a lot of people have a great diet and don't digest. One of the most common, this is probably the most common digestive problem we see. And the reason it's so common is Australians are renowned for eating quickly. And you're not going to get your nutrients if you eat quickly. The whole point of us having teeth is we're supposed to chew our food. In the Mediterranean, there is a phenomenon, and it's called the Mediterranean phenomenon because people there live longer and have less heart disease. They have a 2-hour lunch. They'll sip on a glass of wine with their food, which stimulates digestion. And they don't do 5-minute meals. We do 5-minute meals, and it's really a problem. If you really want to be healthy, you need to start remembering chewing. You're not supposed to swallow lumps of food, and you're not supposed to drink water with your food. You don't do anything that dilutes the stomach acid. And the worst thing you can do is have a glass of water with your meal. It's just atrocious. This has never been done by any traditional society. It's recent, it's an Americanism, no offence to any Americans. And it was introduced in America when rich people liked to show they could afford refrigeration, and they would serve chilled water with food. Red wine has always been, or wine's been used in Europe, always. It's acidic, it stimulates your digestion, so for all sorts of reasons, a good glass of red is not a bad thing. And if you don't want to have wine, you have nothing. Now, this is actually not too bad, but you could improve it a little bit. That's probably a lot better than we normally get, but it's not perfect. Oh, I'd wait half an hour. And you can also do other tricks. You can have something acidic at the beginning of a meal. People used to eat bitter food. We don't now. We eat sweet food, and bitter stimulates digestion. Okay. So now we can start looking at the size and the shape of the red cells. Now, red cells should be very uniform. They should be nice and round, and they should all be pretty much the same size. Now, 5% variation is allowed because always some are new cells, some are dying cells, so you're always going to get a few that are not quite right. And we've probably got slightly more than 5%. And by the type of variation, it looks like your iron stores are a little bit low. Yeah? And when you have low iron storage, you start to get oval-shaped red cells. That's called a target cell, and it's where the centre of the cell is unusually thin. If there were a lot, you'd be concerned about a liver problem, but when there's only a few, it's normal.